Right, hey guys, how are we doing? We're continuing with Totally Not Mark's Berserk reviews. I am so far into Berserk. I think I've even touched on moments in the second part of the Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc that he's covering. I just love it. This arc is so sick. It is like he is now getting his own Band of the Hawk thing going again. Like he's meeting people and getting a group, and that group is becoming very, very capable as well within all this stuff. It's like, oh, it's so sick. But let's get into what Mark thinks of this. Like, oh, it's blowing my mind. It's blowing my mind how good this is.
God, it feels like ages.
Yeah, Griffith coming back was something else, wasn't it?
Don't know or haven't read the title because you're an agent of chaos and choose videos at random. This is a series where I review manga completely blind.
Yeah,
Going
love
into
it.
Berserk, I knew virtually nothing about this series, and now
I
I
had no
find
clue.
myself having long since passed the halfway mark. And within this video, crossing into territory.
Mate, she's so sick.
Title I refuse to believe wasn't inspired by Star Wars in any way, shape, or form. I mean,
Has to
this
be.
can't be a coincidence. There have been a lot of deviations on this tale of self-discovery, self-sabotage, and seldom before seen horrors imposed on Guts throughout his sprawling journey to, I guess,
That
Deadify.
Berserker Armor, my
His
god!
friend, sort of, who he bested in one-on-one battle, who went off to do terrible things to a princess, who got tortured for that, who almost died, who became an angel of darkness, and then reborn anew. All the while Guts has... But thankfully, this
Nothing but rage.
This arc starts
Nothing
to quell
but
the flow of
rage.
questions being asked, and instead starts to answer some as we move towards what now feels like a tangible goal with a host of brand new character arcs that honestly had me enjoying it far more than the Conviction arc for reasons I will get into in this video. Is that a controversial take? I don't know, but what I do know is that I am totally not Mark, and this is my blind review of
Berserker Armor.
Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc, part 1.
I love this music. Oh, mate. Let's go.
One thing I can say about Berserk categorically is that it is dense as all hell when it comes to its plot, themes, and character writing, and not necessarily in that order either. For that reason, I wasn't able to cover everything I wanted to in the last episode where I covered the Conviction arc.
Oh yeah, you said you were going to mention some other bits.
Because this arc is much less complex, we have some extra time to quickly give my impressions on what happened with all that craziness.
Cool.
And while I really want to get into how this arc kicks off, like, seriously, what happened took me so off guard I nearly fell back into my chair, I want to talk about Mr. Eggman.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to try to be honest here. I'm not sure I fully grasped what happened with regards to this weird guy following everyone and lurking
Yeah,
in
the
shadows
Bahamut
throughout
thing
the
was
portion
strange.
of that arc. With that said, something about his design, mixed with his uncharacteristic lack of involvement with the story, made me feel, I don't know, uneasy in ways this story hasn't managed to achieve thus far. And I've seen some stuff in this story.
There's a lot of stuff we've seen, yeah.
The Conviction arc, generally speaking, is all about what people desire the most, and the conviction that it takes for them to achieve those ends. Ironically, or fittingly, while the entire world is begging for salvation in the Conviction arc, the Eggman, who comes from the worst, most rotten places of society,
just wants to
someone who doesn't even really consider himself a person, is the one that works as a vessel for this, quote, salvation, granting an answer to those desires by bringing the Hawk of Light into the mortal world.
Yeah, and he
Griffith
eats
is
the
back and seems to be totally
weird
fine
decrepit
again in his
child that
mortal form,
Casca
which is,
owns.
oh my god, I don't even know if I can process that right now. The Eggman, as someone who watched over Albion and its people, first as a spectator and later as some sort of participant, transforming Mozgos and his torturers into semi-apostles, is easy to miss at first, but how this tiny thing became the center of the story, still without anybody noticing and achieving his own goals by literally changing the world forever, is poetic and sort of prophetic in a sense when you think about this arc's title. Furthermore, and we're getting
Conviction.
the cursed child of Casca and Guts appeared many times during
Yeah, and then
the story,
it swallowed it up, and then Griffith
but
consumed
in the
it.
end, runs out of gas or dies. Either way, he is absorbed by the Eggman, so they both don't die
Let us
alone.
die together,
Which
yeah.
is so fittingly Berserk, I don't know why I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
Is this the end of this character? I'm not so sure. I don't
This is
think
strange,
anyone
because
would
Griffith
think
shows
the current
some
child show up
kind of,
just to
like,
help out the main character
inkling
and
that
vanish,
it's
but only time will tell, I guess.
affecting him.
By the end of the Conviction arc itself, the predictions of Skull Knight are once again challenged by
He is
Guts,
a
and
dude, man.
once again, while everything happens according to what he says, one thing remains different. Guts and Casca are reunited. And it's thanks to all the people Guts knew and all the people that decided to follow him throughout this story. Interestingly, there are some similarities between events from the past that we can notice.
They are very similar, and I was very scared to see what was going to happen.
Reborn into another divine being, Guts and Casca are saved, and even some parallels I mentioned before between Farnese and Casca also exist. And if we want to get really crazy, there could be some inversions at play here too. The Hawks died during the Eclipse and Golden Ages climax, while Guts' new friends all
survived this one. Yeah.
Some of them even decide to follow his tracks. Perhaps this is an indication that Guts is slowly edging his way to an outcome that's imminently desirable rather than an outright horror show or a compromise like this Conviction climax was. But okay, to round out my analysis of the Conviction arc's conclusion, before I move on to something else, I think I should share my favorite part of this story, which was Guts' choosing of protection for Casca over vengeance towards Griffith. Having seen a man destroying himself on this endless, violent crusade for revenge, thanks to the lessons he's learned in this story, chose the less indulgent and selfish.
He's grown so much, man.
Protector of Casca. And interestingly, the panel structure here seems to be an homage to one of Miura's favorite mangas, Devil. Just a fun fact.
Oh, okay.
With that said, Griffith's rebirth is astonishing. The circumstances surrounding the kingdom with the Kushan
Zod's just like, let's go. It's like,
pretty suspenseful. The people of Midland full of fear and hope is appropriate. And Guts and Casca fighting for their lives and Griffith flying over some of the most incredible landscapes I've ever seen in manga kicks off this next arc.
Hell yeah.
Falcon of the Millennium Empire. As I noted towards the beginning of the last section, one of the arc's strong points is, I think, its ability to take complex emotional stakes and present them in a format that's honestly quite easy to follow on a surface level. This will help in my conciseness when writing this review. And so, instead of going through things one at a time in a boring fashion, considering that this arc thus far is split up into two plot lines, Guts and Griffith's respectively, I thought
it's so weird, and then at the end of this first half where I think it's going up to when... Oh, I'm not going to say it yet.
After what happens in the very first scene of this
I think Zod and Guts are going to have to fight together, is where I'm up to. I think they're going to have to fight together, and that's going to be sick.
I think I had what could only be described as a mild
yeah, I was like, what is going on?
Choosing to protect Casca after giving up what was the perfect opportunity to take him out at the climax of the prior arc, seeing him here like this was one of the most stunning instances I've experienced in the story.
Mates.
It's been a running trend since the very beginning of this manga, with it framing a number of instances and moments highlighting that Griffith is out of reach of Guts, sometimes metaphorically and sometimes quite literally.
He's always stuck to his guns, though. I'm going to get my own kingdom.
With his very existence flying in the face of what should have happened to him by now. He should have died. Guts' sheer determination to struggle onward towards his goal is the savage heartbeat of this story. However, in this scene kicking things off, while Griffith appears to be the same person he knew back then, as he has been in the case of every prior tale, he is still unreachable.
Zod, mate.
The immortal stands before Guts as the formidable obstacle.
This fight was sick.
His sword, once lost in the boredom of thousands of battles, finds a new purpose: to protect his overlord, Griffith, against the giant dragon slayer of Guts.
And he does well in this fight, man. Zod's impressed.
While watching this take place, it felt almost as if time was standing still. While the action is naturally as good as one might expect from Miura, with some outstanding illustrations on display, it was Griffith's short conversation with Guts that really took the reins of this scene for me. This is the first time these two have been in communication with.
It's like I told you once, I'm gonna get my my kingdom.
For Griffith to effectively espouse the same rhetoric and vibe as when he was in the Golden Age arc is both nostalgic and haunting at the same time.
It's very weird, isn't it? Yeah.
What's happened since those simpler times. And it's in this short but illuminating conversation we notice something a little different about Guts. Instead of the man who had a clear conviction for revenge or protection, he seems to be stuck in a sort of limbo.
A little hesitant, isn't he?
Dedicate himself to one goal. More on
Casca.
that in just a bit. There was one instance that I found quite surprising during this scene, and that was Griffith's sudden protection of Casca. There's the obvious contrast being made here with Guts in that Griffith seems to be single-minded in his goals, and therefore without hesitation can act, in this case protecting Casca. However, this conflicts quite violently, I think, with the heinous acts he's perpetrated in the past to both Guts and specifically Casca. He's perfectly willing to sacrifice any number of people if it means him reaching his goal of ruling over a kingdom. But this stands in direct contrast with that. I'm not sure what to make of it, but perhaps it's a mind game. The very last time Guts saw Griffith in this state and appearance, he had left Griffith outmatched and defeated.
That's very true.
As he walked off in the snow. Snow in this series carries with it a tremendous amount of symbolism, I've noticed. It can be interpreted as the cleaning of the old slate and fresh start, and it can be emblematic of isolation and emptiness. When Guts defeated Griffith back during the Golden Age arc, he inadvertently shook the status quo in everyone's eyes, and Griffith knew
Yeah,
that,
no one
which,
thought that he was going to win that fight.
Part of the reason why he reacted like he did. However, this scene's conclusion almost acts as Griffith's revenge for that moment, as he leaves Guts alone in the snow after a crushing battle with his minion, Zod. With him holding all the cards and through Casca reminding him of what he did to her.
Damn.
That's just my take.
I mean, maybe.
Following this scene, the two main characters, Guts and Griffith, fracture into two separate storylines. While they naturally reconnect at a later
Which is
point,
really
I will
interesting,
dive into
because I
Guts'
don't
portion
know
of the
where
story
it's
first,
going
as
now.
it's by far what I have the most to talk about, and by extension, what I found the most entertaining and interesting. Guts. Picking up the pieces following this climactic battle, a new goal or destination becomes apparent. Casca cannot take care of herself, and this safe haven they once knew has been destroyed because of Guts' battle with Zod. Perhaps, again, this could be symbolic that Guts can't have it both ways. He can't protect Casca while also fighting Zod, and by proxy, Griffith. This speaks to the conflict in Guts' mind, which this arc deals with predominantly as he travels to Puck's home, the land of the elves.
I can't
And
wait
this is
for us
where
to
the
get
character writing
there.
for Guts
I
gets
hope we get there.
extremely
Oh.
interesting. On these travels, Guts realizes how difficult it is fighting the demons of the night that attack, while also having to consider Casca's protection. Everything was easier when he didn't need to hold
Lady Finesse, though.
that more animalistic side of himself, that side that he knew could struggle and survive. However, he can't do that now. He has to fight 10 times harder in order to stay alive and to protect Casca.
I love it.
He
just does anything for her.
Longer. Now he instead has to learn to
That is
use
love,
shield
man.
and a
That is
sword,
love.
the pressure of which ends up breaking. A sentiment
It
echoed
kind of reminds me of, like,
sword feels
sorry
heavier
to get...
than ever. Or
But like, my
Casca
mom
is
had
a shell of
Parkinson's
person
before she passed
was.
away, and she
These
didn't
remaining
remember
traits of
anything,
all
and my
has
dad
been
did
inside of her.
everything to make sure she was okay, so it does remind me of that when I'm reading it.
He reached the goal, but how can he keep his promise to her and to himself of never abandoning her? All of these quotes speak to the frustration, the conflict,
My
and
dad
ultimately
literally
the
did
mindset of
everything
Guts
for her.
that wants to believe Casca is worth it. But just like in every difficult challenge, there's always that side that tries to rationalize a way out of that tough responsibility, particularly when the stakes are as high as they are for Guts. And this is where Miura decided to explore something really interesting within Guts' character. Since the beginning of the story, there's always been a more primal or beast-like persona that Guts would embody in order to successfully survive his day-to-day existence. What I once thought was an artistic choice depicting Guts as this beast of the darkness has become a very tangible and real plot element.
It really is, my god. There's something trying to take him over.
Surrounding Casca, struggling to protect her, and even questioning whether or not he should any longer, she goes missing.
Oh
After
my
having promised
god.
himself that he would never lose her again, in the adrenaline, fear, and frustration, Guts snaps. The beast once again takes over, and in the process, hurts Casca, scars Casca, the
Yeah.
person he loves the most. In a fashion eerily reminiscent of what Griffith committed, he became a monster. And if we ignore the obvious and awful imagery for a second, there's a phenomenal piece of storytelling taking place here through this character that calls all the way back to the very beginning of his life. And that character back to is Gambino. When we were first introduced to Gambino way back at the very beginning of the Golden Age arc, we were presented with this rough around the edges, tough soldier type that was good at what he was. A soldier, a fighter, a killer.
Yeah.
If he wasn't good at being that, then he would have likely died long before he could even have been any sort of father figure, good or bad, to Guts when he was younger. However, once he lost his ability to fight, he started to more obviously and overtly lash out in terrible ways, which ultimately led to his downfall. He couldn't be a good father, a good nurturer, or a good carer, perhaps in part because all of his life he had to do the opposite to survive, to look out only for himself. This obviously isn't to excuse anything he did in the story, but it speaks to perhaps his mindset and psychology in those moments.
I'm learning a lot as well, because I'm currently going through therapy as well. But like, everything relates back to our childhood, man. Like, and Guts has definitely got a lot going on there.
Guts has lived a life as a lid where he's been forced to fight for his life against odds he's been told are insurmountable, with death waiting around every single corner. In order to survive this, Miura has shown us how animalistic and beast-like he becomes once fighting off hordes of monsters and demons. Defying what he was told was impossible. It served him as a useful function, and as such has pushed him in a direction of being someone that wants to be alone and wants to be someone that relishes in crushing the weak and taking what he can for himself. Which brings us to this moment where he makes the decision to not indulge in those heinous acts any longer and instead do what's difficult. He decided to care. To care for and above all else protect Casca.
Yeah, man.
And along the way, he quickly discovers how difficult it is to do that. How difficult it is to remain compassionate and human in those dire circumstances. And how easy it might be during those more difficult moments to allow oneself to be
mate,
lost
when
to
he's
those
like,
darker
and he realizes,
feelings.
it's like, oh, come on, no.
Real time we are seeing what it might have been like for someone not as strong as Guts to go through something like this in Gambino. What it might have been like for a prisoner of war who can't let the battle go. And following this, Guts feels horrific.
Of course he does.
Rightfully so. The very same trauma Guts experienced
now she can't trust
in
him.
many ways still is experiencing after what Gambino did to him was what he passed on to Casca. What he scarred Casca with. The fear of being touched, or more specifically in this instance, the fear of Guts himself. How can they keep going? Well, Miura gave us an answer almost immediately. Guts needs help. Farnese and Serpico.
Here we go. Serpico's so sick when he starts like getting his magic stuff going on. He's awesome.
And perhaps that's putting it a little too lightly. Serpico from the outset is very easy to respect and cheer for. Even when he decided to take on the main character Guts on the side of a cliff,
Yeah, you were kind of like, ooh, wonder how he's going to do this.
Cheering his innovative and opportunistic efforts in taking down Guts to help his lady Farnese. However, with her on the other hand, having been introduced as a religious extremist with strong swaths of sadism right beneath her unassuming and innocent facade, Lady Farnese has been a character I never thought I would get the chance to actually explore in greater detail, let alone appreciate. Berserk is, in one way or another, quite interested in demonstrating how awful people can be while also possessing the courage to explore the reasons as to why that might be the case. Farnese is shown to be a hateful, entitled, scornful bigot.
God, when she starts off, yeah.
Burning of innocent people. And yet, through the flashbacks we receive, either through Serpico and herself, we discover that her upbringing was far from normal or secure in some senses through the eyes of Serpico himself. Serpico's journey and history is as you might expect. He's a determined, attentive, and appreciative individual with unwavering loyalty to those he feels a connection with. Having come from the slums and from a mother that struggled to
Animation looks good. I'm very confused. I need to watch Super Eye Patch Wolf's videos on like the anime because there's some very like what happened to a certain series and that.
Some of the unsavory aspects of her character.
Because this animation looks sick, but I've been told the anime is awful at parts.
With regards Lady Farnese and Casca. Casca and Farnese are sort of a package deal in this arc, you see. All the while Guts does what Guts does best, hack and slash, Farnese guards Casca with her life.
She does actually, yeah. It's quite nice to see that she starts throwing that, like, herself in front.
It's made clear early in this arc that Farnese carries with her an admiration and curiosity for Guts and what he's managed to show her. Since meeting him, her entire worldview has not only been challenged, but successfully shattered. Compare this to Casca's experience with Griffith, who changed her worldview and following that, held her devotion. Casca was lost in a fantasy, an idealistic cocoon-like vision of what Griffith really was. Farnese, on the other hand, by following Guts, has managed to actually better herself. She's got
definitely. She is amazing.
In addition to that, Serpico has even remarked that she's becoming more compassionate. She's starting to feel more human. In other words, Guts was a positive influence on her life, while Griffith was a negative one on Casca's.
Yes.
And fittingly, Farnese becomes Casca's security blanket in this section. Isidro. There isn't a lot to discuss here, at least not in comparison to Guts.
He's fun to have around, though. My God.
But I am thoroughly enjoying what Isidro contributes to the story in more than one way. On a surface level, there's something to appreciate with his growing rapport alongside Puck.
Yeah, they are fun together.
Dire or intense scenes a little bit, and by doing so helps to enhance those more serious moments by creating a wonderful contrast in tone. A similar technique has been used not only in comics but also live-action films for decades. For reference, think about how effective Robin Williams was at shifting from humor to more dramatic tones in the blink of an eye. They often go hand in hand. I mentioned before that I appreciated the commonality personalities that existed between Isidro and a more traditional shonen protagonist also, which shine through magnificently within this portion of the story. While he is by no means the focus, the minor subplot or character arc he's undergoing in this arc is quite cathartic. He wants to be
It's
the
nice
best
to
at what
see.
he's trying to do, and when he doesn't measure up to the other talents of other warriors in the
I like that he
party,
doesn't straight away as well. Like, it's quite character building to see him fail.
And while this aspect of him is explored in more detail, with Guts encouraging him to use his strengths and to follow what feels right to him, the real struggles in his development are made with the introduction of a brand new character and addition to the party, the Little Witch.
She's so sick.
Schierke and the Astral World. Magic has joined the party.
Hell yes it has, and
Now, that might
it's a
sound like
freaking
bullshit
boss.
comment, but in reality, it's true. I don't want to spend a ton of time speculating on the circumstances surrounding the astral world and what the ramifications of that might be, because I'm smart enough to understand that I can't fully comprehend the scope of what this offers the story in the future.
Hell,
However, I will
yeah,
speak
it's
to
a
what I
lot.
think of
It's a
character
lot.
Schierke. The Little Witch in training is an interesting addition to the story from a conceptual and utilitarian standpoint with regards to the narrative. She offers a bunch to the party that they otherwise cannot do, and she acts as a manifestation of magic in this world in a big and bombastic way.
She is impressive as hell,
She
man.
offers an interesting contrast to Isidro's character too. Where Isidro acts as a naive blowhard, surprised when he can't live up to his own expectations, Schierke seems to be the exact opposite of that. She's had the necessary training, the backing of her mentor and teacher, but lacks the belief in herself and her abilities.
That is it, innit? She just needs to believe that she can do it, because my god, she can. Jeez.
His own insecurities. Acting at first towards her as one of the boys in this team, he slowly realizes that she is far more capable than he is.
Oh, yeah.
Showing this feeling of inadequacy that he has. And that's not even to make mention of the magic on display here. Since Griffith did the whole Ooga Booga and became the Demon of the Night, and then the Hawk of Light once again in his reincarnation, it's no exaggeration to state that in the immortal words of Will Smith, this world has been turned upside down. Demons are everywhere and magical creatures roam the land thanks to the astral world intersecting with the reality Guts understands. Interestingly, Schierke, all the while she has to contend with her own uncertainty. I adore what she means for the story and how she impacts the actions of the rest of the party. That isn't even to make mention of the massive waterbending and darkness entity she manages to entangle herself within, which in and of itself is inherently interesting as a power set from a visual standpoint, but also because of the drawback to using such a massive amount of magic. And numerous times we see her unable to disconnect and almost lose herself in these moments of entanglement, and it's just fascinating watching as she picks and chooses when to make use of these abilities she has. Particularly interesting in the context of her being this fledgling witch tasked with holding everyone else's hand through this experience. It's wonderfully handled. Like, she
It's
gives
very
the team their
well
own
done,
enchanted
yeah.
items.
Oh yeah, give them all this. Here we go. Yes! Here we
Isidro
go.
becomes a pyromaniac, and Guts gets the Big Black Armor, otherwise known as the
Berserker Armor.
I touched on this aspect of Guts'
Mate.
character in the early portion of this video and
Thing as well, it was very.
animalistic
I felt like it was
side
hinted that
manifesting in a
the
very
Skeleton Knight
physical, real way.
owned this
Horrific.
prior.
And well, this Berserker Armor is sort of the natural extension on that idea, with even more trade-offs beyond the clear and obvious psychological ones in both himself and those he inflicts pain upon. The Berserker Armor, as I understand it, is brilliant for all the same mechanical reasons as the Kaioken is in Dragon Ball.
Ah, okay, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
tremendous
Don't feel pain.
and suspense factor attached
Keep
to
going.
it. While it
And feel it
amplifies the wearer's
afterwards.
strength and resilience, the damage the body is forced to absorb is compounded by the armor's ability to keep the wearer going.
Yeah.
This aspect of the armor, in addition to the primal animalistic and frankly demonic state Guts is now tapping into, creates the perfect storm for this armor to work its magic. And work its magic it most certainly does. Once Griffith's forces ambush the team with
Mate,
one of the
this was
main
so
warriors
sick.
in those forces, Grunbeld looking to take on Guts one-on-one. And with the Berserker Armor, it becomes clear that Grunbeld, despite wanting a real fight, must assume his real form in order to
He's
survive.
like, I've
this
got to
encounter with his
transform
new
now.
power of Guts. And his real form is, oh, it's spectacular. The dude is a giant
Dragon.
crystal dragon.
Yeah.
The page spread revealing his true form was absolutely gorgeous.
So sick.
It's certainly up there with some of the most impactful page turns for me in this series. And I love how his white, regal, and bright facade clashes and contrasts starkly with the black, savage,
Yeah,
and
man.
dark
Yeah, yeah.
appearance
White
of
versus black there.
Guts' newly acquired armor. The fight is great, but ultimately serves the narrative function of communicating how his new Berserker armor works. And long story short, it's sick and it works great.
And his hair's gone white though, so it makes me feel like it ages him. Like, that's why I was like,
Schierke and Guts
I feel like the Skeleton Knight owned it prior.
focusing on the issues that both he, Guts, and she, Schierke, have to contend with moving forward, with both of them carrying a tremendous amount of weight on their shoulders, respectively, both dealing with difficult decisions they need to make. Schierke needing to follow her late teacher's lessons in finding a way to believe in what Guts can do, despite her head telling her that it's impossible. Which is sort of ironic because she deals specifically in magic, which in and of itself is sort of beyond belief. And then we have Guts, on the other hand, staring at what he could be pursuing. A quiet and normal life for Casca. But this is Berserk, and a tranquil, quiet moment can't last too long. Cutting this warm moment short, Skull Knight appears again to tease us once more with Guts' destiny. And in doing so, addresses something important, helping us understand that in order to deal with Griffith, one has to challenge the world's rules. This speaks to Schierke's issue somewhat, but I wonder if this armor Guts has recently acquired transcends his body to something more than human. Or perhaps he could be speaking to his demonic state. Only time will tell, I suppose. But one thing that has struck me from this arc has been when Skull Knight remarks on some potential good news Guts received about Casca. The Elf King they are heading towards seems to have the ability to restore Casca to who she was once before. This is insanely great news for Guts. However, this is Berserk. Skull Knight speculates as to whether or not Casca will wish for the same thing Guts
does she even want it?
And it's a frightening sentiment and possibility for Guts to have to contend with. However, the more I think about it, the more I can make sense of that statement. It's been remarked upon numerous times that this Casca is distinctly different to the Casca we all know and love from before in Golden Age. And so, in theory, making this wish for her, in a sense, would be like asking to be killed and born anew. This current Casca would need to make the wish to reset and restore the previous Casca with different memories. An entirely different person. Suddenly, this fairy tale-like mechanic is dealing with some really complex philosophical questions about identity and existence. The final thing I want to acknowledge about Guts' squad before I move on to Griffith is this little kid that Casca picks up.
Yeah, it was weird.
There's something weird about this kid, something mystical or, I don't know, something.
Well, it hasn't popped up for a while now.
This thematic tied to Casca, I can only imagine how this little one will play a role in how his story unfolds moving forward. Griffith. And speaking of unfolding stories, it's finally time to properly meet the invaders to Midland, and by association Griffith, to this portion of the story. Now, seeing as I will only be reviewing the first half of this arc, Griffith's portion of the story is actually significantly smaller than the team of Guts's. So, let's explore what I can concerning his return and expansion into Midland. Much the same as the Golden Age arc, Griffith is depicted as this ethereal and angelic presence descending onto the filthy
it's so weird, because it's like, what?
Since the beginning of the story, the Kushan Empire has never been a focus, but boy does it play a leading
role. Oh mate, they are big now.
And his new crew. The new Band of the Hawk is unveiled piece by piece to us, with each subsequent area Griffith conquers and liberates coming from the Kushan Empire, and with it bringing a new addition to his crew. There's this little girl called Sonia that has this strange, almost psychic ability. And similar to Casca, she has become infatuated or obsessed in a sense with Griffith, for it was his presence, she believes, that granted her that power. Other characters joined the ranks early on, both human and, I guess, dragon alike, as we saw earlier.
They have weird demonic moments, don't they?
The full scope of Griffith's new army until we come to know the character of Mule, a newly liberated leader that soon gets befriended by Sonia. And in her efforts to introduce him to Griffith personally, she walks him past increasingly creepier and creepier.
Yeah, with demons and stuff. It's like, whoa.
Entities lurking in the dead of night. Griffith is dealing with a whole new level of force when it comes to his army, granting us perhaps a glimpse of the sort of kingdom Griffith expects to rule over. Of all the conquests and captures in these chapters for Griffith and the new Band of the Hawk, by far my favorite scene comes in the form of Griffith's advancement and attack on the Kushan Emperor, Ganishka. This fellow is an apostle,
something
yes.
else.
However, he is distinctly different to all the others we've seen so far, as he refuses to vow himself to any one allegiance beyond his own, not even the God Hand. By their very nature, apostles normally will follow the orders of the God Hand, yet this character wants to transcend them. He says, "I'll reign over this unclean world as a demon king and rebel against God." He wants to become a higher power, which makes him the perfect enemy to Griffith in this part of the story. However, I would be lying if I said that this character alone is the reason this scene is my favorite, because he's not. He's not even remotely my favorite aspect of it. This is. There's a tremendous amount of history
when Griffith saves Princess Charlotte and takes her away in the sky. It is nice, this.
We understand Charlotte's desire to be with him again.
She
and
loves
we can
him to
all see where
bits.
this whole scene is going. What was once depicted as a horror show when Griffith last climbed through her window is presented in this instance like a fantastic, joyous storybook ending.
It's a fairy tale ending,
that
this.
spanned generations. The paneling here is spectacular, and the look on Charlotte's face says it all. Carried forth by a one-horned beast across the sparkling night sky atop her bed, Griffith, her dazzling Prince Charming, has come to her rescue. Where this will go, I perish the thought. Which finally brings us full circle to the unexpected reunion of the two main parties, Guts' team and Griffith's band. And strangely, there's no conflict upon first encounter.
Oh,
Griffith
yeah.
doesn't see Guts again, but instead, Schierke encounters Sonia, the girl that can read minds.
Oh yeah, that was an interesting
Where will this go?
encounter as well,
We
yeah.
gotta read ahead and see. I hope you all like this video even half as much as I loved this arc. Berserk is an incredible story that never seems to ease up or lose itself in the impossible scope Miura has brought to these pages. I hope to see you all there for the next video, but until then, I've been Toy Not Mark. I'll see you all next week, and thank you all so much for watching.
No, it's a sick arc, like, absolutely sick. I really do feel like where I'm up to though, like Zod and Griffith are gonna team up, man. I think that's gonna be an interesting one. I'm really like confused because like obviously you got Griffith being the enemy of that head dude that's against the God Hand, and then it makes sense for like Griffith and that to maybe side with Guts and that to side with Griffith, but I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, I liked Mark's take on that, and thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of your video, upload a link in the description to the Patreon page. $1 a month is all that helps support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. And thank you all for watching. What did you guys think of that? What did you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave comments down below. Let me know what I should watch and discuss in future videos. I'll see you guys, all you guys, next time.